got so many questions. Okay. You're a very physical actor, and the two things I've seen, it's amazing. I look you up on Google. You have a body of work that's longer than Jack Benny's, and he lived to be 80. And that's how it is now. You know, it's over 30 listings, and Jack Benny only had about half that number, I think. But the two I'm familiar with is Brick and Mysterious Skins. I want to focus on that. You appear to be a very physical actor. You throw yourself into a role, even to the point of beyond the point of reason. When I talked to your director, who I loved, Ryan Johnson, he said there was one scene where Noah Fleiss's character, I think, Tug is punching you and actually connects.
Yeah.
And talk a little bit about that experience and what it was like to take a punch.
Yeah, I've never been hit before. I've never been in a fight before. I was raised by pacifists and, or at least ex-hippies, and never got hit. And I don't know, when you watch movies, it seems like actually getting hit, they always make this sound effect that's kind of almost soft, like the sound effect, But that's not at all what getting hit really feels like. It feels more like, it's much harder than that. It feels more like you should hear two pieces of wood, like, connecting, because that's what it feels like. There's no give to your face, and he hit me right in the face. And, yeah, I think I remember him hitting me, and I remember how I felt, and then I remember being on the ground. And I don't think I was like out for very long, but Ryan said he didn't even know that it had happened, because all the fake punches had been convincing enough that he just thought that it was another one. But then I didn't get up, and then I told everyone that I wasn't okay. But
one of the things, because I'm a boxing fan, and I see that happen to guys all the time, and there are now some exciting boxing movies, and it's like, at that point, you're out of the movie, right? When that happens, it's like you're no longer the character. Who are you at that point? What happens to you in your sense?
Well, I guess I was scared for a second because I didn't know what happened. I was more just surprised than anything else. Because, if you're a boxer, at least you're expecting to get hit. You brace yourself for it. You practice it, right? I wasn't expecting to get hit, so I got a little startled. And, yeah, I broke character. I guess I need to work on that.
No, they say in the boxing field that the punch you don't see is the one that's devastating.
Yeah. Well, I imagine that. But I saw this punch full well and was expecting to just, fake as if I was taking it like all the other punches. But it didn't work out that way.
I bring this up because the role is so good in the physical side of it. Your character is in part cartoonishly bouncing up and down like a cartoon character, like the Coyote or something. I mean, you take an insane amount of violence and just dust yourself off and get right up again. Talk a little bit about that, the demands of a role like that.
Well, I'm glad you bring up Wile E. Coyote, because the Looney Tunes were definitely a big influence for the whole physicality and actually just even for the whole rhythm of Brick. Brick is really fast and snappy. And for entertainment's sake, it's not about trying to imitate reality. It's about being quick and fun and intriguing. And am I supposed to hold this? Sorry. And should I hold it?
Yeah, go ahead with that line.
Yeah, so we were watching Looney Tunes, and a lot of people bring up the violence in Brick, and there is a lot of violence, but it is it's cartoony like that. It's not an attempt to make you feel how darkly morose human beings can be towards each other, and violence. It's more theatrical than that, and it's more cartoonish, like you said.
One of the things I bring it up is because your character seems to fight, quote, dirty. In other words, he looks whatever opportunity he has to get the guy down. Like when you fight that football player, you seem completely ill-matched. And then, of course, you just fight unfairly.
No, of course. The character he doesn't believe in fighting or anything like that. He's not a martial artist. He just wants to find out what happened to his ex-girlfriend. And he doesn't care who has to get kicked in the shins to get it done.
Now, he has his own kind of secret before the film starts, and he's had that relationship with that girl, the girl who disappears and who is killed, and there's something about their relationship that went sour, and something about him that went sour in connection with these people he's now investigating. What's your concept of that as the character, as to what actually happened that we don't actually see enacted in the film?
Well, if I told you that, then then what would be the point?
But I mean, just a little bit of your sense of playing a character that is, he's a kid, but he's not quite a kid.
No, he's not a kid. None of the characters are kids, even though kids played the characters. The characters they're archetypes. They're patterns in the human race that in this movie manifest as different parts of a high school setting. But that's the thing about Brick is a lot of people think film noir or the detective story is about men in fedoras and Tommy guns and things like that. And what Ryan, I think, is saying is that it actually goes a lot deeper than that. That there's something more basically human and beautiful about the detective story genre than the specific film noir icons. And that's why he wanted to set it in a whole nother vocabulary of iconography, was to address those more basic and universal patterns and not get caught up in being compared to all the great film noir movies.
Also, his conversations are not really conversations. They're either interrogations or they're cryptic exchanges like he has with the brain.
Yeah, well, the conversations are actually, they're very they're not conversational in that they're not leisurely. He's always has an agenda. Brendan, from the very start of the movie to the very end, has such a strict and narrow agenda so that every time he speaks to someone, there's one thing he's looking to accomplish, and once he's accomplished it, that's it. He's not
He's out of there.
yeah, he's not friends with anybody, and it's sad in that way. He's just coping with his own pain over the loss of his ex-girlfriend by trying to get something done, and he, as soon as he stops concentrating on getting it done, it hurts too bad. So he never stops concentrating on it.
What's his relationship with the brain, who's the only guy that he seems at all close to?
Well, the brain is his brain.
Right. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Talk about working with you work with some great young actors in this, including Lucas Haas, who's becoming a bit of a legend now. He hasn't hit 30 yet since he started at 7, an old soul. Talk a little bit about him as the Pin.
Lucas is the perfect Pin, and I don't want to tell you too much about it because just a character name like that, the Pin, has got to make you wonder, what's the Pin? And that's what I want you to wonder, and that's what you'll have to find out. But it won't be any sort of like cheesy X-Files, like, oh, we build up this mystery, but then we don't follow through. There is a Pin, and it is Lucas, and the rest you'll have to find out.
You also have a relationship with the veteran actor Richard Roundtree, who many of us who are a little older recognize from a whole bunch of things. And he's the only, quote, authority figure in the piece. And you have your ability to stand up to authority. Your character stands up to authority with him. Talk a little bit about that relationship. I love it, the camera angles and everything else. It's very, very Orwellian, actually.
Orwellian? How is it Orwellian?
Well, you just feel like you're in this room. It's like, Winston could be being interrogated by this guy. You don't know what he represents. He's supposed to be the assistant vice principal, but it seems more sinister than that.
Yeah, I like that you bring up 1984, because Brick does create a whole world unto itself. Like when you read 1984, you see where the world that you're reading about bears similarity to your own world. But it is an entire world unto itself, and that's what Ryan created. And as far as the role that Richard Roundtree played, Shaft.
Yeah, so very, 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 very interesting.
Shaft. He, like I was saying before, he's the archetype of the authority figure. He's the scene that, in most detective stories you have with, like, the chief of police or something like that. And they do call him the assistant vice principal, just like they call Brendan a student and just like they call the femme fatale a cheerleader. But really, it's not about being an assistant vice principal or about being a cheerleader or about being a high school student. It's about this pattern in the human race of an authority figure and a rogue, and these exist in any genre.
The language distinguishes itself. I was in a play called 40 Deuce, playing a character named Mr. Roper, a business executive who's stoned on marijuana that's been tainted. And the language was like Shakespearean, extremely profane. The language in Brick is similarly eccentric, idiosyncratic. Was it difficult, more or less difficult, to learn and to speak? Talk a little bit about that. And did your television background help you in any way?
It was very difficult. It was technically the hardest thing I've ever done, because the language, what makes it easy, people always say, is it hard to memorize those lines? And the answer is no, because if you're doing lines that are well written, they just make sense. So it's not hard to remember them, because if you pay attention to what the other actor's saying, then the next thing you say should be logical. And if you know who your character is, you should just be able to kind of act natural and say the line. But in Brick, the lines aren't natural. They're not based in reality. They're bigger, faster, smarter, funnier, and more entertaining than real people could ever speak. And it took a lot of practice. I slept with the script under my pillow and just did it again and again and again. And because the point is, if I practiced it enough and repeated it enough, it would become natural. Because even though the language is so over the top, the emotions in Brick are all very genuine. They're not idiosyncratic, and they're not invented. They're real emotions that everyone's feeling. And so the challenge was to learn the lines well enough so that once we were actually doing them on set, I didn't have to concentrate on saying the lines. I could concentrate on, just what I needed to be concentrating on, which was feeling what I needed to be feeling to tell the story.
What do you see Ryan has told me that he thinks it's the Continental Op from Dashiell Hammett, that's your character would grow up to be. Who did you model himself in your own head as to approaching the character? Do you have any models?
Yeah, I had a lot of models. Tom Waits was a big one. Serge Gainsbourg.
Why Tom Waits?
Well, both Tom Waits and Serge Gainsbourg, and most of a lot of the models I had were more musicians, quote unquote, than actors, quote unquote. But they're people that use language in a way that, like I was saying, it conveys such real and it conveys an emotion that you can identify with immediately. You know just how he feels, but he's doing it with language that's so much more beautiful than real life language could ever be.
Another thing, the campus in San Clemente seems so deserted. And that's another Orwellian side of it. When you're running across that campus, as you do several times, it's like nobody's there. It's like a stretch of the West where you're on a horse and you don't see anybody else.
Yeah. Well, the first movie that Ryan and I watched together was The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. So it's funny you bring up a stretch of the West, because that was something we were looking for.
Because it really does feel like you're the man with no name in some ways.
Thank you.
There's a little bit of romance in it. There's just a tad of it, and there are a couple of girls. There are femme fatale-like female characters.
There's tons of romance in it. What are you talking about?
Well, talk about that romance. Yeah, talk about it.
Well, the whole thing's romantic in the literary sense. I mean, it's not realistic for sure. I think romantic's a good way to describe it. And then as far as what you mean by romance, as far as between a boy and a girl and that kind of sex-inspired romance, there's three women in it, and all three of them are so gorgeous in their own ways, and they all the sex between them and Brendan is all totally different, and it's never there's only one girl that it's kind of honest with, and that's the girl that he doesn't have anymore. And then there's these two other girls, both of whom are kind of using their sex, and you don't exactly know how. But it's nice to get caught up in.
Also, Brendan is in bed a lot by himself. We see him as a teenager in bed, sometimes because he needs the rest. He's been up far too long. And once Tug takes him back to his house and he's just in bed, you know, like resting up from a beating or something, whatever, the latest beating he's gotten. Talk a little bit about that motif, because I haven't seen that with a character. You just see the character in bed by himself, watching the clock and things like this.
I don't know. It doesn't seem. I never thought that it was so extraordinary for him to be in bed. I mean, he has to rest. The thing is, you're with Brendan all the time. There's no other scenes. Like, the movie doesn't say, okay, Brendan's resting now, let's go check out these other characters. The Brendan's very much from the movie. Jeez. The movie is from Brendan's point of view always. And so when he's resting, the movie's watching him be in bed.
I wanted to sidetrack just a little bit into Mysterious Skin and some of the contrasts and the similarities. It's a singular performance, again, a very physical performance, a very demanding kind of performance. Talk a little bit about that, how you get that character in the first place, how you come to do that.
The Mysterious Skin character. The Mysterious Skin character was just kind of there, as in the novel and in the script that Greg wrote. Brick and Mysterious Skin were very different preparation processes, because Brick was this immense technical challenge, and the character himself is facing an immense challenge the whole time. He's struggling and fighting, whereas the character Mysterious Skin is kind of just taking it easy and letting things happen the whole time, and that was more my approach to that movie. You know, I remember an early conversation I had with Greg, and he just said, don't think about it too much, and that was pretty much my approach to almost every scene in Mysterious Skin. Was just not really thinking about it too much, just kind of going along and, I mean, paying attention, but kind of letting it happen.
Like as the character would be doing, basically.
Yeah.
You did another movie, which I haven't seen, but I've read something about, called Manic, which sounded very impressive, about kids who are institutionalized. I think Don Cheadle is the psychiatrist. Only he may be the patient, too. You're not quite sure from the description of the movie. Talk about a little bit about your character and what you liked about that movie, because it seems of a piece with Mysterious Skin and Brick.
Yeah, Greg, I think, largely picked me for Mysterious Skin because of Manic, because he had seen it. And I'm really proud of Manic. We made it on cameras not too dissimilar from that camera, and it was a rough one. I was playing a character that couldn't control his anger and was in a lot of pain and was always angry, and sometimes when he got too angry would beat somebody up really, really bad, and it was a heavy one. It's not the kind of movie that you sit down to distract yourself with, but I'm really proud of it, and like you said, Don is in it. That was such a pleasure and an honor, and I learned so much working with him.
What do you learn from Don?
Let's see. I mean, you know, it's hard when you ask a question like that, what did I learn from Don Cheadle? It's hard to describe how to act, how to be an actor, or how to go about, acting in a movie. Different people attribute different words to, they use words like character and, I don't know, method and motivation and things like that. And I never studied acting. I just worked ever since I was 6. So I don't know. I mean, I can use a lot of those words in certain ways, but what I got from Don is nothing that I could really put into words. It's just, I've been an actor my whole life, and working with an actor that's that good, that's that skilled, just meant a lot. And I don't know, I mean, I couldn't summarize it.
Mysterious Skin, the sex scenes that Neil McCormick undergoes are like the fights that Brendan has in Brick in some respects. They're both battering experiences and confounding and unexpected. They may go in any direction. In the case of Mysterious Skin, one of the sex scenes becomes worse than a fight, basically. Right. Talk a little bit about how you approach those. 'Cause it's amazing the way the camera catches you and everything, but we feel it's very well done. It's some of the best work that's been done in showing same-sex sexuality in a film.
Well, like the sex scenes in Mysterious Skin, I always say they're not really sex scenes, because to me the word sex scene means implies gratuity, and implies like that it's not serving the story any longer. It's just, well, here's an excuse. We're telling, we have this movie and here's these two characters and we kind of want to show you them having sex, but we could just as well not show that to you. Like Hitchcock Hitchcock never showed anything, but those stories got told fine. Whereas Mysterious Skin, I don't think the story could be told if he just cut to before the sex and after the sex, because it's not just a sex scene. It's a scene. It tells the story. There's no dialogue in it, but it absolutely furthers the plot and the development of the character, and it has all the turning points that any good scene should have. So I didn't approach the scenes with sex in them any different than I approached any of the other scenes.
One of the scenes I recall with one of the Johns, it said, "Get a move on, kid. We're on the clock here."
Mm-hmm.
Like a job.
Well, it was his job, and that's how he was making his money.
Yeah. It just had that kind of feel to it. This is America, and this is what another job that is done in America.
It's the oldest job in the book, right?
In terms of picking your roles, these very indie roles, how is this an instinct? You read a script and you say, "Yeah, I think this is right."
Yeah, I mean, I pick the roles based on a script. There's very few good scripts, and when I'm lucky enough to find one, I definitely am interested. And then it has to do with who's directing it and all the other people who are going to be involved in it, and why are they involved in it? Are they just trying to make some money, or are they, into doing something because they believe in it and because they love it? And it's rare to find in show business. It's rare to find anywhere, I think, in any industry. And yeah, I've been lucky enough to happen upon a few people, Greg Araki and Ryan Johnson being prime examples of guys that were making a movie, that wrote a script and were going to make a movie because they loved it, because they love movies, and because they wanted to say something, and because they thought they could say it with that movie. And that's what I want to be involved with. And whether it's indie or studio, it doesn't really matter, because people make good, real, genuine movies in the indie world, and they make bullshit in the indie world, and same goes for the studio world. So to me, it's about why people are doing it, and how they're doing it, not so much who they are.
It's like you become a partner with Ryan in that film. It seems the way he described it. He said he really enjoyed working with you on a daily basis. It was like your mutual film.
Yeah, Ryan was probably the least egotistical director I've ever worked with. Ryan created an environment which is pretty remarkable for a first-timer, that he made everybody want to be creative and contribute and do their best. And he certainly did for me, and he never was like, "Hey, this is my movie, back off." It was always, let's make something together, and I appreciate it. I think that's part of why it came out so good.
What's the hardest thing to do in Brick? What was the hardest scene for you? Both approaching it, maybe, or in the process of doing it? I mean, obviously, the scene where you get knocked out is hard, but that may not be the hardest thing.
No, all the fights are really fun. They weren't hard at all. I don't know. Maybe the last scene. The last scene is I just talk for 5 minutes on end, and it's kind of I don't want to give anything away, but it's in every detective story, there's going to be a climactic reweaving of the whole tale, and that was left to me. And it was hard. It was a lot of words, and it was basically everything I'd thought about and known for the entire movie all came into this one scene. And I think it turned out really good, but that was a hard one.
And Mysterious Skin, final question. What was your favorite scene in that?
I like the baseball scene where you see a bunch of different sides of him all in one scene. You see him being this kind of announcer, and then you see him being kind of, being a dumbass with his buddy, and then you see him being really sweet with this little kid, and all in one scene, it all turns on a dime. And I remember even the first time I read the script, that was my favorite scene.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.